Hi, everyone watching live and watching this back. This is an introduction to progression. I'm going to take half an hour or probably just under to go through different parts of the product and how they work, and also talk through a little bit of the methodology behind progression, how we think it's best used, and some tips and tricks along the way. So first of all, I'm going to talk about how to build content in progression. That first job that you're going to have to do, which is to get things set up, make sure that everything is looking great for your teams. And then we'll get into how to use progression day to day and how to get managers engaged and employees engaged too. So without further ado, let's get into it. What you're looking at here is the progression organization homepage. So my demo company only has 9 people in it. It's very small. Obviously, progression is capable of handling thousands of employees. Let me just admit Jennifer. But this is basically where all of your teams live. This is the home for all of your content. We can get into it a bit later, but you can see these little public flags on the different teams. If you make your frameworks public or your organization public, this page minus this menu, if I get rid of it, is basically what your public organization will look like as well. And you can add a little bio, or you can even add open roles, as you can see up here, to your teams as well. We can get into that a bit later. But first of all, I'm going to dig back into a team. So the first thing to understand about progression is based on the concept of teams. And a team in progression is, you might call it a community of practice or a job family, if other words for it. This is like a group of people that share a set of skills that might be working towards the same career paths. So I'm going to go into the engineering team in this obviously very small company, and we can have a look at how a team fits together. So I'm actually logged in as Jane, who is an engineering manager. I have edit access over all of progression. If I was logged in as an employee, then obviously I wouldn't have so much access, but I'll touch on what people can see as I go along. So let's orient ourselves again. This is a single team. This is the career pathways or ladders that has been set up for the engineering team. Here you can see an individual contributor track at the top and then a management track below. So I could really easily just add another individual contributor, principal software here, and that straight away just adds another layer to I can also add another track if I want to, or I can duplicate. So if I decided I wanted to create front-end and back-end engineering as separate ones, then I can do that, all of that from this page. If I click into an individual role, there's a ton of stuff to look at here. So I'll talk through it really quickly. At the top is the name of the position. So everything is editable from this page. This is a description. These are actually all from our library. So all of this is sort of pre-written. You get this out of the box, but of course it's all editable and you can do what you want with it. And then when I scroll down this page, you can start to see the different skills in this role. So on a very simple level, someone might look at this, read through the different categories and get an understanding of what's expected of them at this level. So here I have a craft category, I have a human category, and I have a leadership category. So for my staff software engineer, it's pretty clear, 10 different skills that I need. I'll go into how all of it fits together in a second, but first of all, I'll just touch on the stuff down this side. The label that you can override if you want to. Very useful to have those short codes for positions we know. Level of seniority. You can add a salary range to this role, and on some plans on progression, you can add multiple salary ranges. So if you want to support global workforce, then you absolutely can do that. I won't do that right now. I can choose which track this position is in, and I can start to add people to it, and that's where things get really interesting. So that's the anatomy of a single position within progression. So I might start to put people on those roles. I can see here I've got Donald, who's a senior software engineer. Donald will be able to log in and see that that's where he is. Um, Also, if Donald wanted to compare that position versus others, then he can click this radar diagram in the top right and start to compare senior software engineer with maybe a staff software engineer. So straight away, he can see the difference between his current position and the one above on his specific pathway. But he might also want to be a manager, so he can compare himself versus a manager and start to see the differences there. Or he might even want to become a designer. So progression also supports comparing your any role in any team against any other in the whole organization. So that's really great for just being able to explore a little bit more widely different roles within your organization without being constrained to that one team. So if I head back to the team view here, the next thing to think about is, remember, we've got all of these skills down here. You're going to want to decide which skills apply to which positions. And in fact, you'll want to think about which skills are in the whole team. So if I go to this skills tab at the top, you can see that I've got those three categories of skills that we saw earlier. And I've arranged different skills in different categories. If I open up a single skill, I can see that this skill has 5 levels. So each level has a bunch of content in it. That again has come from our library. So if you want to get started, then there's a ton of content to get going with. So I can scroll down each of these and see and edit whichever one I want. Obviously, if I'm editing something that's in use, then it gives me a little warning here, which is very useful so that I know whether to edit and how to edit. So this is sort of step 2 in the process. Once I've set up my career levels, then the next step is deciding the skills in the team. And often what we find is that a lot of skills are generic across the organization. So for example, what we call human, you could call core or something else. But there's a set of things that might actually be written in exactly the same way, whichever team you're in. And then also we have leadership, might be quite similar as well. You could equally put in your company values or something else that you believe should be shared. I won't go through it today, but creating a team template means that you can actually lock in those skills into every team and then give people the ability to only edit the craft skills, for example, if you want to build something centrally and then deploy it out to multiple teams. So that's the skills side. Writing skills is really hard, so we try and help you as much as possible. We have a big library of content. So if I open up bias to action, I can see that this is another, this is a simply written skill here. Or I might choose giving feedback, also very important. And I can just add one of these skills to the team really quickly. The other thing I can do is generate a skill by using our AI skill generator, which is incredibly powerful, saves teams literally months of writing content. So that's one worth playing around with to save yourself some time in filling out this part, which can be intimidating. The final step is to work out which skills live in which roles within the team. So that's where this framework view comes in. I can go through each level of seniority, and for each skill, I can decide a level of the skill for that level of seniority. So my level 1 associate software engineer for technical understanding might just have level 1. But equally, I could give them level 2, and it's all just as quick as clicking a dot in there. So that's the basic setup. There's tons more to dig into as you get going. There's tricks, and we have opinions about how big frameworks should be, and being careful not to make your content too large. But that's something that we can help you with as you get going on progression. So let's say we've set up all of our content and we're happy with that. The next step is to add people into the mix. So I can upload people manually, or invite them manually, or we do integrate with HRIS systems and SSO. So if your Okta instance is deciding who can log in and log out of which software, and even what title they have and which manager, who's their manager, we can ingest all of that and keep things up to date. So people get a login, they can explore this content on a really basic level. This is just where they can familiarize themselves with it, start to have those brain waves and those thoughts about where they could focus next. When they want to actually start getting a sense of how they're doing, that's when the other side of the product becomes really compelling. So as a manager, I want to have a great conversation with everyone in my team, get a sense of their skills, be able to pull out the actions or the next steps and improvement areas so that they can get where they want to go, and so that I can feel like I'm supporting them really successfully. So if I go to the check-ins view, in fact, I'll just click this add button. And this is the simplest way of getting started with the other side of progression. So the add button basically gives you access to everything you need to be able to put data into the app. So as an employee, I want to start tracking the things I'm doing, linking them up with the skills so that I have all the evidence I need to have a really good conversation. All of that leads to, I'll get to these very quickly, but all that leads to a check-in. So a check-in is the sort of central activity that a manager and a report might do together. So I want to go through each of those skills in my role. I want to find out from my manager how they feel I'm doing. I want to how I feel I'm doing, and then I want us to sort of rubber stamp it basically and agree where I stand and come up with some actions next. Hi, Maris. So I'm going to start a check-in. I'm my manager is Sophie, so it's pre-filled Sophie as the assessor of this check-in, and director of design is my current role, so I will happily go for that. But progression does give you the option to choose different roles to check in with and different assessors as well. So if, for example, the best person to check in with isn't your actual line manager, but is a functional leader, for example, then you can also do that. And if you want to check in against the role you want rather than the one you're in, then you can also do that too. So I'm going to just start a check-in, which will open up a page, which is effectively a step-by-step process through each of those skills in my role. So I can see here the top one is pragmatism, and I'm expected to be level 4 of pragmatism. Remember, when we were looking at skills, each skill has a set of levels. So this is the level that's been chosen for this role. So this is the one I'm going to measure myself against. I've got all of this content, so this high-level description of the level, and then these examples, which is what really brings it to life for me. And this is often the point where people really start to read the content when it becomes real, when you're really sort of assessing yourself against it. So I can whip through each of these. I basically have to answer this simple question. I'm working towards meeting or exceeding this skill level. So if I choose exceeding, I get a little bit of confetti, but regardless, I'm going to fill in each of these, and I can see this progress bar notching up as I go. This is why you want to make sure that you don't have too many skills, because obviously each additional skill is an extra bit of work for people to go through. So that balance of enough granularity without overwhelming people. So I'm going to go through each of these. I can write a little note. And when I'm finished, it goes over to my manager. So in this case, Sophie, she gets an email saying, I've completed my side of the check-in, and then she goes in and does hers. So I'll do a check-in as an assessor, and we can have a look at that. So Lance's check-in review is ready for me. I just got an email saying Lance's check-in review is ready for me, and I'm going to go through exactly the same process. So this is me as a manager doing the same thing, working towards meeting or exceeding. I will choose again. If I want to, I can view his answer, but we hide it by default because we don't want to force people to see that if they don't want to. I'll just work through exactly the same process again. One thing that you'll see here, it says 4 updates, and I will dig into that in a second. But that's an important part of this process and something that is incredibly powerful to build as a habit within your team. But I'll show you that in a second. First, I will show you a completed check-in. So after I've finished my review, then we do a joint review, and that is the the most that's the sort of the payoff of all of this work, is that me and my manager get to have a really good conversation where we've decided separately how they're doing, and then we can sort of align together. So, for example, here Vivian thought she was working towards this skill, technical understanding, and I thought she was meeting. So we might decide meeting, but there may be also some things that Vivian needs to work on. So we could add an action for Vivian here. So what would the action be? Learn the new code. So this is technical understanding, so I'm going to tag this with the right skill here. I could set a deadline for this. This is a week, so good luck, Vivian, with this one. I will add that in, and now we have an action that we can look at and refer back to in the future. And when Vivian's done, we can check it off. A little bit more confetti there. So this is a great way of just going through line by line, coming up with those actions. You'll end up with a really clear plan. So if I close that, when all is done, you end up with a lovely completed check-in. So if I go into my reports page, Vivian's check-in obviously isn't complete yet, but Jimmy has a completed check-in. So let's have a look at that. So here's Jimmy's completed check-in. You can see that Jimmy is smashing it. He's checked in against Design Manager, and he was exceeding expectations. In fact, there's not a single skill that he's working towards, which is fantastic. And actually, probably this conversation will be, what do you want to do next? And let's try and get you there. So if Jimmy wants to check his check-in against Senior Design Manager, then he can do that too, and immediately get a sense of what the new skills are that he's going to have to think about in order to level up to that. So you get this nice radar diagram. You get all this sort of playfulness of exploring what could be next. Strengths and areas to improve, which for Jimmy, there's not too many of those. The check-in summary that we created during the check-in, we can create actions again, and then we've got all of this line-by-line stuff. So no data is lost. I can then grab that as a PDF or as a spreadsheet, a CSV, and use that however I want. If I want to look at all of Jimmy's check-ins across time, then that's where I can go to his growth graph. And here, this is 3 check-ins he's now completed. So approximately maybe a year it's taken him to do 3 check-ins. That's sort of the cadence we would expect. And we can see that he's grown. This is a really nice way for Jimmy to check in against his progress over time. So a year ago, he may not feel like he's changed that much in that year, but he can actually see the evidence right in front of him. So measuring that growth over time helps employees to feel a sense of progress, but it also gives managers a sense of who are the people that are really leaning into career growth and who need maybe a little bit more support there. This page has a bunch of other interesting stuff on it as well. So, for example, I can see line by line the different skills that Jimmy has, and I can see how engaged he's been with growing them too, and any open actions and things like that. So we briefly touched on this box. I'm going to quickly talk through all the different ways in which Jimmy can add data to his check-in. So if I go back into this check-in, in fact, I'll go to Lance's check-in, and I can open up this update side nav. So this is basically a timeline of all of the things that have been added to progression since Lance's last check-in. And here we have a note, we have a win, and we have a completed action. No feedback on this skill, but that is also possible to do. So this is where weekly you can start to encourage a behavior of adding notes, adding wins, which are like kudos, and you can add wins for multiple people within a team. It's a really nice Slack integration as well, where people get rewarded for giving wins to each other and can sort of react to the wins. Of course, as with everything, you can add skills as well, so it gets pulled back into that check-in. So all of this, the idea is really to make sure that that work that people are doing is being recognized and stored ready for the moment when it really matters. So that's a win. Actions we've already seen, simple sort of to-dos there. And then feedback is the other one. So I can request feedback. So I might request feedback from a bunch of people within the organization about a meeting that I just ran, for example, or I can just give feedback to someone directly. And what we found internally at Progression is often I might give feedback verbally or in a conversation, and then just say, I'm going to just jot it down in Progression as well and capture that. It's a record of what we talked about rather than necessarily just giving feedback in Progression cold, but there's different ways of doing it. All of this feeds back into that check-in and gives me and my manager tons of data to be able to make a good decision about where my skills are. So whistle-stop tour of all of the different things that an employee can do both weekly with this feed and all of the different sort of actions that I can create within there. And then that quarterly or several times a year check-in, which is the more formal rubber stamping my skills. What this unlocks for the organization is really compelling data around how people are doing as well. So if I go to this check-ins view, which as I'm an organization admin, I get to see, I can look at all the check-ins that have been completed over time. I can choose only completed check-ins, for example, and then I can look at, and bear in mind this demo data is not fantastic. There's not a huge amount of it, but here I can see completed check-ins, and of that, how people did. So in this example, it's 3 check-ins from Jimmy, who we know is smashing it, and then Lyra actually did an excellent job in her last check-in as well. But typically you'll see a more of a balanced mix of people working towards versus people meeting and exceeding their roles. And those people exceeding, they're probably your the folks that you want to be looking to for promotion or reviewing compensation potentially, or just supporting their growth, their potential leadership or high potential people. And then those people that are working towards, do they need some more support around them? So the real opportunity here to just look across the data at large and work out where people are. But this view, this page serves another purpose as well, which is, right, where are my check-ins that are stuck behind a manager, for example? Who do I need to kick in order to make sure that this is happening? And I can also drill down by team, for example, or I can drill down by a reporting line. And there's a bunch of other ways that you can cut this data to get insight out of it too. So that's a very quick sweep of the product. Let me check. I've got 3 minutes left, which doesn't save a huge amount of time for questions, but I will ask anyway. Does anyone have any questions just to round us off?
No questions so far. Thank you.
Okay. Lovely to meet you, Maris.
You as well.
Thanks for this demo.
Fantastic. Okay, well, for those of you that are already using Progression, excellent, thank you, and lovely to meet you in person. For those who are just thinking about Progression, please do get in touch with the team. We can help you, guide you through the right setup, and also how to get started. Yeah, tune in the future for more events. If you go to progression.co/events, more things will be cropping up there too. So have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. It was great meeting you.
You too. You too.